Yo, what's up, everybody? How you doing out there? Let's get this going. Let's go. All right. What's up? Let's do our daily dose here of some drive time literature, folks. Let's get it going. Let's get it going and pop it. Yeah, smash that like button. Smash that like button. Like, let's please like, share. Get this going. Um, Everybody, please. Yes, you can see, as always, see that Cash App button up there, that especially that my beautiful mods are are going to drop in the chat. That would really help me out so we can keep this going and we can make it better. Let's get some gear. Shout out to all the homies out there. Let's get this going. This is romantic literature. Byron, part 2, romantic era literature, stream 3. Let me know in the chat if I freeze or if I have any problems as I'm going, because I don't know how the signal's looking today. But let's get it going. Let's go get it going and pop it. Hope everybody's having a wonderful day, a beautiful day, wonderful evening. I just noticed that the time changes again this weekend, so it's almost spring. All right, enough about the weather. So today we're going to cover Lord Byron again with this book by Benita Eisler. And it's a pretty good book. As we said in part 1, go, if you're watching this later, check out part 1 of the Byronic Hero. And it's a Child of Passion, Full of Fame about Byron. In the last stream we talked about Shelley and Ozymandias. We've talked about Blake. In these streams, we've done Renaissance literature, romantic literature. We've done some modern literature, right? We've talked about Wilfred Owen, Shakespeare, Milton, Blake, Shelley, Byron, and I can't think of what else we've done so far. We did Yeats. We've covered some Ezra Pound, some American literature, and we're going to keep going through some romantic era literature. And again, we're going to go to the source material. We covered Ozymandias yesterday, and already we're dialed in. I was seeing the word Ozymandias everywhere posted today. So let's see. And then, of course, last week, we did, what was it? We did Julius Caesar, and then it popped up with Lindsey Graham talking about if that little Brutus out there. So let's see what else pops up, y'all, in the zeitgeist, I suppose. We're talking about Byron, so let's see what we can get out of this. However, what we're really doing is we're going back to the source material, and we're kind of doing a refresher of the stuff that you may have done in high school, undergraduate, graduate degree. And we're just going to talk about worldviews, author's purpose, what we get out of this, out of the words on the page. And we're going to do some biographical material here with Byron. Thanks for dropping that link, Mixkey. I appreciate you, everybody out there. Yes, support your boy right here. Support your boy right here, so we can get some gear, so we can get some, we can start streaming. We can get some Streamlabs up. We're going to get it, y'all. We're only in the second week of doing this, and we've done pretty well. Let me take a sip of my coffee here. My coffee from my Heisenberg mug. There you go. Ozymandias again, right? Heisenberg, Breaking Bad, Ozymandias. Okay, let's do it. So we were talking about Byron and the Byronic hero, the dark hero, right? And we were going through some of the biographical material, and we're going to see that this gets pretty dark. So we had left off with Byron meeting his cousin that he fell in love with, and they sort of bonded over the idea of murder, which is, typical of Byron. We talked about how romantic literature, the romantic era, again, just one more time, we're talking about romantic era, the British romantic era, 1798, 1837. We have no interest here in talking about like Fabio romance literature or some trash, okay? We are talking about the canon of British literature. So let's go into what it says here on page 38. and 39 of this book, if you happen to ever pick up a copy of this. And it says, words became an early weapon in Byron's arsenal. That was, again, because of his club foot, his deformity, which he saw as a mark of Cain. Shout out to TGF. I see you there, homie. Good to see you. The first 4 lines attributed to him were 4 lines of doggerel, right? Sort of light verse. In Nottingham County, there lives at Swine Green as cursed an old lady as ever was seen. And when she does die, which I hope will be soon, she firmly believes she will go to the moon. He's talking about his family here and his Byron's own weird relationship with his mother. Later on, we get, let's see, this is where it starts to get a little dark. Okay, so I might use I'm going to try and avoid some loaded terms here, but this book is crazy, y'all. It says, during the late winter and early spring of 1799, Byron lodged alone with May Gray. It was during this period that the nursemaid began regularly taking the boy into her bed and M-wording her. Masturbating him. Again, this reminded me of Crowley. I mean, this is like straight out of Al Crowley's biography, right? Because remember the story about Al Crowley, and he had the maid that worked for his parents, and he talks about how he took them when he was a small child. He took the maid, who was this older lady, into his parents' room and ravished her, violating his parents' bed. And the same thing here happened with Byron. He's young. Says Gray also had adventures with young men her own age. She brought coach drivers home with her, and after getting drunk with her new companions, beat the child she had earlier initiated into sexual activity. The beatings were the only behavior that Byron reported to his mother. He didn't report the other stuff. Now, I know this is a lot. This is a lot for an early evening stream talking about poetry, okay? But this informs Byron's own literature, his worldview, and the idea of the Byronic hero in the first place, okay? We have total TRA here, right? Traumatic ritual abuse. This is exactly what it is. He's young. He's being subjected to a sort of a psychosexual torture. And this says, Gray's unchecked abuse of the boy, of Lord Byron. The torment of the quack Lavender's mistreatment of his foot, because they had this guy, Dr. Lavender, who they hired to give treatments to Byron because his foot is basically like, oh, you got this club foot that hurts you all the time. So we're going to like put some oil and some spit on it or something like that. But he was in constant pain. And this added to, the trauma that he's going through while he's in his childhood. And his desultory lessons with Dummer Rogers all convinced Hanson that Byron must be removed from Nottingham promptly, but not promptly enough, if Byron is to be believed. Before he left, the nurse had doubled her punishments as revenge. So she goes in there, abuses him sexually, and then beats him. He's a kid. It's the poet Lord Byron. This says on page 40, in conversation just after the poet's death in 1824, when Byron was 9 years old and at his mother's house, a free Scotch girl used to come to bed to him and play tricks with his person. Hanson found it out and asked Lord Byron, who owned the fact. The girl was sent off. Later, this says, Byron's reports of May brutalizing him and his determination to have her fired point to shame at his complicity, as well as a desire for revenge. The rage of a boy between latency and adolescence, whose first lover and surrogate mother tortures him with infidelities. Detached thoughts, Byron reflected guardedly on the relationship between his lifelong attacks of depression and his premature induction into the darkness of sexual obsession. My passions were developed very early, so early that few would believe me if I were to state the period and the fact which accompanied it. Perhaps this was one of the reasons which caused the anticipated melancholy of my thoughts, having anticipated life. This is sad. This is crazy stuff, you guys. Sick. He says, the anticipated melancholy he would always experience was accompanied by another related impulse, to cut off or dilute with others an exclusive attachment to one woman before he could be humiliated or rejected. May Gray had taught him the Bible along with the forbidden knowledge called biblical. He would always associate Orthodox Christianity with cant and hypocrisy, even while he was constantly drawn to conventionally devout women to their everlasting regret and his own. Yeah, this is, I'm sorry, y'all. I mean, I hate to get into this, but you know, we gotta, I mean, this is it. This is real. This really happened to him. And I think that this plays into the very idea that most people don't understand, they have no concept of when we talk about the Byronic hero. Now, we talk about the Byronic hero in terms of literature, and it's the tall, dark, and handsome dude or whatever, and he's, you know, troubled. But why is he troubled is the point. Why is he troubled? Well, anybody who knows anything about this in this sphere, who's done any reading on this, who has gone into this in terms of TRA, knows that this is likely to be the case. And you can see, I mean, look, I got the thumbnail up of, you know, Kylo Ren in Star Wars, and shout out to all the Ewoks out there. And you know, this is a romanticized dark hero who, what does he do? He does the Oedipal thing in the new films, right? Where he loves his mother and he kills his father, right? And we wonder, why is this the case? Now, of course, this is romanticized of right. The word romanticized, which is sort of misused there because that's become the connotation in the film. But in reality, we watch this and we go, this person has experienced some psychic break, right? His soul has been attacked. And what a shame. Not only what a shame, but I mean, this is, you know, he goes through this and then yes, he was rich and he was talented, but he was tortured his whole life because of this, obviously, right? As we see over and over again, if you study any of these, I mean, luckily he became a poet and not a SERIAL killer or something, right? But what is wrong with these people, right? What is wrong with these? What is wrong with these people that do this? Yes. This says, well, we know what's wrong with them, right? They're demons. And who would do this, right? So on page 47, he says, it's the book says, let's see, at 36, let's see, there was nothing unseemly about Catherine Byron's forming an attachment to a man. That's his mother. Remember, Byron was at a weird relationship with his mother, mainly because of his father dying an early death and leaving him in debt for the rest of his life. Yeah, you got the Ewok shout out there, Mixie. And it says, what we just read was that Byron, yo, what's up, Jerry, my brother? What we just read was that Byron obviously did this thing of forming attachments with people, especially women, and later in his life, and cutting them off before he could be traumatized. Although we're going to see that somehow he is involved in so many, it's kind of elliptical in the book, but he is involved with the kind of continuation of the traumatic ritual ABUSE that he was subjected to when he was a child, right? I would call this SRA. And this says, let's see. She looks as though she'd been made, he finds this woman, she looked as though she'd been made out of a rainbow, all beauty and peace. And then Byron he's still a small child. It says, his sacred and profane love, the torment of living with May Gray. This is May, is older woman, adult, demonic, sick, perverted maid, with its alternation of sexual games, guilt, humiliation, and probable physical abuse. Probable. And his idealized love for the undefiled beauty of Margaret Parker. Byron is sent off to Harrow, which is one of the most elite boarding schools. Now, Jay, shout out Jay's analysis. Jay has talked many times about the idea of the privates of the the British public school, right? Here in America, we would call it the boarding school. These elite boarding schools. You've got Phillips Exeter, right, where W and them went. They went to Phillips Exeter, Phillips Andover, and then we have lots of those boarding schools in the South, elite boarding schools, especially around DC. And then we have, schools like Le Rose in Switzerland, the, CIA dictator boarding school where Alan Dulles and like Kim Jong-il or whatever went, the Shah of Iran. And we get these, but the idea of it, as Jay talks about it, is that, the family will send off their boy at, age 5 or so off to this boarding school. And by the time they graduate, remember that one of the whole points of it is that they have been deprived of motherly contact, while they're at school for almost the whole time. Right. And this will erase the sympathetic gene. It'll erase the motherly contact so that it's almost like you can almost think of it why don't we just, like a school in psychopathy, right? Now, I'm not saying that everybody who goes to an elite boarding school is a psychopath. I'm definitely not saying that. I went to a private school. But what I'm saying is that in the old school, especially with Eton and Harrow, right, where the princes go, and the idea, especially during the Victorian era, because these schools are they can be 800 years old, right? The idea is that they're deprived of that. And then when they're done, they go off to university, and then they are sent, they're sent to the best university, Oxford, Cambridge, the Sorbonne in France, etc. And then they are sent off to run the empire in various parts of the world, right? They'll be the governor of, the Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, or they'll run the rubber trade in Malaya or Singapore. They will become a Lord Kitchener or whomever in all the colonies. But they are deprived. They become almost like this psychopathic tendency to not. They're part of the old boy network. They have no sympathy for the people that they are overlording. And Byron was one of these. He was sent to Harrow. He was one of these boys, and he was a hereditary heir. He was a full, lord. He was privileged, although he was broke, a gentleman without means, right? And we're going to see that his school experience is very different from anything you've probably figured this, but it's very different from anything that you probably could have imagined. So here we go with this schooling. And this says, used to the defenses of adolescent boys, Drury, his schoolmaster, saw straight through the mulish behavior as a symptom of Byron's excruciating self-consciousness about his deformity, his inadequate preparation, the disparity between his grand relations, and a childhood lived on the fringes of respectability. Soon Drury, like everyone else, had fallen under the spell of Byron's charming awkwardness and feminine beauty. The large gray eyes fringed with long black lashes that stared intently from the pale face framed in auburn curls. And he had a quicksilver intelligence. Yes, there's no doubt Byron was intelligent. I just redlined there. Hopefully I'm still here. You guys still see me? Should still be going. Yeah. All right, we should still be going. Good. All right, we're still here. This says, until the 17th century, a thorough classical education for a young aristocrat was the exception in England. They had the great schools, Winchester, Eton, Westminster, and Harrow, right? Westminster. These are the great boarding schools. I had a friend who went to Winchester, and I lived in Bristol in England for 2 years. So that was right next to one of the great schools there. That's where John Cleese went. And this says, let's see, he started to write poems, and he wrote a poem early. He's very young. He says, deformity is daring. It is its essence to overtake mankind by heart and soul and make itself the equal, I, the superior of the rest. There is a spur in its halt movements to become all that the others cannot. He started writing Greek hexameters, right, a la Homer. And let's see, they talk about Cheltenham near Bath in England, very posh. And then here we go. On page 56 of this book, it says, under the system, this is the system. Okay, so I'm going to describe to you the system of the upper class elite training of the boarding school. Okay, in this book, it says, under the system that prevailed at the great public schools, school monitors controlled the discipline, including punishment for all offenses not serious enough to come before the masters. The masters are the school, are the grown-ups, right? And there's a headmaster. Still at private schools, there's a headmaster. This included the de facto right to regulate the tradition of, this is called in the book, fagging. I'm not going to say that on the stream for a number of reasons, but that's what it was called. And fagging was a form of slavery in which younger boys served the older students. Byron, like every other student, would have had to submit to this apprenticeship in humiliation. Apparently, he found it too painful to mention until he himself was in the position of a master. So that's what you go through. This is like hazing to the max. Okay. On page 59, it says he could choose to be alone, reading novels, travel narratives, and poetry, but it was writing he now discovered that offered an outlet for emotions not easily articulated in schoolboy conversation, while providing at the same time the perfect form to express a rich fantasy life. That's why he began writing. Yes, he's young and he's trying to escape. And remember, Byron, one of the reasons that the Byronic, oh, here we go. First ever bot. Yeah, nuke that son bitch. We made it, y'all. So anyway, like all writers, yes, he expresses this book discusses how the writer, not like all writers, but like many writers and great writers, this is what happens. And this is the Byronic hero encapsulated here. We get the person who endures hell very young and seeks a rich escape and fantasy life because he is endowed with a superior intelligence. He has a superior intelligence. He's sensitive. And yet he's a perpetual outsider is the key, right? That is the Byronic hero, the perpetual outsider, because the outer actions are a reflection of the inner turmoil and strife. It says, this book says, Byron wrote of these years. Half a century later, Hero was to become infamous for the flagrancy of its homoerotic relationships. Whether Byron and his friends acted out these passions sexually is uncertain. The histrionics occasioned by their friendships, explosions of jealousy and power plays, mutual accusations of betrayal and pleas for forgiveness point to issues of threatened possessiveness and sexual exclusivity. Byron's susceptibility to insult seems to have exceeded that of any close to him. I was just talking about this with somebody that that one of the things you learn, I mean, all kids sort of learn this, right? But one of the things you learn at private school is that you have to be able to cut down an insult, right, quickly, because you will not survive. Private school, especially, even today, fosters a sense of competition that is supposed to be reflected in society amongst especially the higher levels, right? Which is that basically that you have to succeed. No, I'm not saying succeed at all costs, but you have to succeed because everyone else is out to get you and for the same thing and for the same role or the same purpose, right? And one of the things they do is they sort of foster this sense of and that's not bullying. I wouldn't call it that, but that does certainly exist. But this sense of, you are in a Lord of the Flies type of situation always, and especially with your fellow class members. And if you can't keep up, if you can't put up with it intellectually, physically, athletically, then you will not make it. And they are very clear, they're very clear about that, right? Normal school is required, of all kids, but private school, right? They have enough money and enough time and enough resources where they don't need you, right? If you can't make it, you're gone. And Byron, especially, we're talking about the late 18th and 19th centuries. This is like the absolute climax pinnacle of this sort of thing, right? And it goes into a disgusting degree of detail that I don't know anybody who ever saw this. But we all know that the elite schools, the truly elite schools, the boarding schools, especially the English boarding schools, we know this, right? We know this happens. But shit, I never saw any of this bullshit. Excuse my language. This is a family show, and please forgive me for that. It says, page 60, this is not a family show, by the way. This is for grown-ass people watching this, and so we have to be able to read the truth here. But this says, but in Hero's homoerotic underworld, every form of transgressive sexuality, I'm reading from the book. I'm not making this up. This is in the book. Okay? It's in the book. This says, in Hero's homoerotic underworld, every form of transgressive sexuality from gang roip to sadomasochistic activities was openly indulged. In Rendell's one of the houses, it was later reported that every boy of good looks had a female name and was recognized either as a public prostitute or as some bigger fellow's bitch. Bitch was the word in common usage to indicate a boy who yielded his person to another. There were 3 students known as the Beasts. Okay, now I'm going to describe what it says here. This happened to Byron. After he'd been rolled on the floor, indecently exposed, and violated in front of spectators, the 3 took to trampling on this kid. Whenever they encountered him, they something saliva and what was called something upon their bitch, cuffed and kicked him at the mercy, shod shoes at him, and drove him with curses, whimpering into his den. They would make them dress up in like Turkish headgear with diamond crescent, glittering brocade turbans. I mean, this shit is ridiculous, man. You can see why. I know, Jeff. I'm trying. You can see why. You can see why. Later on, he dressed up in this Turkish headgear and stuff. Right? It's crazy. He's just reliving this stuff. Yes, forgive me for my language here. I'm trying to read from this book, but I will definitely. I'm trying not to use the loaded terms. Okay. Let's skip that. We've had enough of that. Let me get to later on a couple of things when he grew up, because I don't need to go through this whole damn thing. This says when he grew up, after he graduated from there and after university, and then he became a famous poet. I'm skipping way ahead here. This says Byron said, the drugs I swallow are of such variety in their composition that between Venus and it's not Aeschylus. I am Aesculapius. I am harassed to death. The duties of love and healing were far from his only tormentors. And then later it says, let's see, I'm going to skip ahead here to, I marked this page because it's got Hellfire Club-esque activities. And it says, let's see, we went down to Newstead together, where I had got a famous cellar and monk's dresses from a masquerade warehouse. They're putting on monk's habits, okay, for this party. He says, we were a company of some 7 or 8 and an occasional neighbor or so for visitors, and used to sit up late in our friars' dresses, drinking burgundy, claret, champagne, and whatnot out of the skull cup and all sorts of glasses, and buffooning all around the house in our conventional garments. Our average hour of rising was 1 o'clock. He says, I must not omit the custom of handing around after dinner, on the removal of the cloth, a human skull filled with burgundy. It says Byron's images of Newstead revels hints at scenes of sacrilege. In Childe Harold, he teased readers with suggestions of sex and blasphemy. Here's from the poem Childe Harold. Yeah, this is pure. Do you know what goes on at Skull and Bones? Well, I can't say. They had rituals, some of the most ancient Egyptian rituals. And that is exactly what's happening in this book. Monastic dome, condemned to uses vile, where superstition once had made her den. Now Paphian girls were known to sing and smile, and monks might seem their time was come again, if ancient tales say true nor wrong these holy men. I'm not going to read much else of the biography. I'm going to stop there because it gets worse. Believe it or not, it gets worse. In fact, the book talks about how Byron was in debt. And so essentially he was blackmailed by powerful people, especially this woman who was a G-Max character. And he was party to Trafficking. And that this got to him, but he was already in the system, and then from there it even gets worse. Okay. This is total Eyes Wide Shut, Skull and Bones, Satanic Ritual, ABUSE territory. Now that is the true Byron. Okay. And that should inform obviously your viewpoint now, that the Byronic Hero is the anti-hero, obviously. And he is the Satan figure from Paradise Lost. And that's what Byron intended. He got that from Milton, and he got that from his own life. Okay. That he is not the hero. He is a creeper. He is a creeper. And it's very difficult. It's difficult, I think that's difficult for a lot of people to handle, but that is true. And so, this plays into our ideas about, when I did the Transcendentalist stream, Emerson said this, right? Remember Emerson said that in the essay we read on self-reliance, where he says basically that he's got no problem with being the Luciferian devil figure, right? Because that means that he has total freedom. And that should show you that the people who espouse this and who are, oh man, transcendentalism, we're all one, aren't getting it. Okay. Now, I'm not saying the idea of, transcendence or transcendental literature, right? Or the idea of literature that lifts us up or that gives us a viewpoint into the world. But this gives us a different viewpoint into the world, right? It gives us we have a completely different idea of the reality of where these people come from. Yeah. So, yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. So, yeah, Crispy says, any poets in the chat, please submit your works for based analysis. Yeah. So, yeah. Now, you may walk away, and I'm sorry if I ruined Byron for anybody watching this later. But, this is the truth. That's what it says. So, I wonder, should we actually read a couple of Byronic poems just to see how this manifests itself in his literature? Let's do it. Where's my book? Hold on, let me get my book out. we'll read from the old anthology here. We started off with She Walks in Beauty. And I can tell you the first stanza of that one right away. But let's find some Byron in here. Sorry, you guys, I forgot to pull it out beforehand. And thank you for Jetski. Thank you for Kang Jeth for keeping me on track here, you guys. Because that was a little much. I know that was a lot. Let's see. Hold on, let me get the other book out. I don't want that one. Hold on, be right back. I'm getting the other book. Bam, I pulled a Pac-Man. Okay. All right, let's see here. George Gordon, Lord Byron. Thank you guys for sticking with me through that difficult material there. Oh, let's read Eliana's poem. She said, wrote this in my teens, the sun is bright, the moon is crescent. Change your attitude because you're a peasant. Eliana, that is just wonderful. That is a wonderful poem. And I think that it's special. And I think that we will always remember that one because you are a wordsmith. I think that was wonderful. So shouts out to Eliana. Shouts out to Ellie out there for being stunning and brave and sharing that wonderful piece of literature. I really do appreciate that. I'm being genuine. All right, so this is She Walks in Beauty by Lord Byron. Okay, here we go. She walks in beauty like the night, of cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes, thus mellowed to that tender light which heaven to gaudy day denies. One shade the more, one ray the less, had half impaired the nameless grace which waves in every raven tress or softly lightens o'er her face, where thoughts serenely sweet express how pure, how dear their dwelling place. And on that cheek and over that brow, so soft, so calm, yet eloquent, the smiles that win, the tints that glow, but tell of days in goodness spent, a mind at peace with all below, a heart whose love is innocent. So this is an interesting poem, especially in light of what we just read, because this poem is obviously a yearning for something pure and something beautiful, something innocent, right? In terms of the woman that he loves. Notice the contrast between light and dark, right? Notice the above and below imagery here. And this is it's Shakespearean that he compares his beauty to the night. Remember, we talked about Sonnet 18 in one of the last streams. How he compares his beauty to her beauty to a summer's day. Right, we get bright imagery, and then he contrasts it with, no, summer is actually tempestuous, and you are calmer than that. Right, that's beautiful. But then here he says, Byron says, her beauty is like the night, where a clear night, right, cloudless climes. The climes are the heights, right, and starry skies. And notice the fact that he includes star imagery. I mean, yes, we've talked about Al Crowley in this stream, but notice that the star imagery here is brings in the idea of like star-crossed lovers, right? That they are fated to be in love. Now, obviously, there's the literal and the figurative meaning when we're looking at poems. And he says that mellowed to that tender light which heaven to gaudy day denies. So he calls daytime gaudy in its light, and that at nighttime she is more beautiful. It's almost ghostly, right? One shade the more, one ray the less. So we're talking here about an almost Artemis image. Shout out to David Patrick Harry, Church of the Eternal Logos, and to Rachel at Based Homeschool Mom, who talked about the lunar imagery, right, referring to the lunar cults and the bacchanals, right, the women who worship Diana and Artemis, and of course, just a refresher, like when we talk about bacchanal, right, which is like a orgy, and it comes from the rites of Bacchus, right, the Roman name for Dionysus, or like he says in The Doors, right, he says it'll be like Dionysus, man. What does he say? Great golden copulations in the streets of L.A. And it comes from the book, the play, The Bacchae, where in ancient Greece, plays and religious rituals were tied into one, right? And that's why they wore masks. The mask represents the persona, the face, or the different aspects of one's own soul, one's own central psyche. And the play and the religious ritual tied in, especially with the Bacchic rituals, where this is why Bacchus is the god of wine, because for half the year, it's like a drunken orgy. And then for the other half, the orgy turns into a major letting of blood, right? The women will roam the countryside, mad with drink and drugs, killing all the men. And so what does that have to do with this poem? Well, because he's tying in his love to this sort of lunar goddess imagery, right? Of the night with the stars in her hair, and the raven tresses, he says, the dark hair of the night sky. Of course, it's ironic, sort of, that, isn't it ironic that, Artemis is a Birgin? Yes, but it's that way because Byron is searching for purity, almost like he is searching for, he wants to be sanctified, but he wants to be sanctified through, I don't know if we could say through degradation and decadence. I think this poem is, he's probably, this is the speaker here, is honestly searching for something true. Of course, he's idolizing this woman, right? And he says, one shade the more, one ray the less, had half impaired the nameless grace. Grace, notice the word grace there in line 8, which waves in every raven tress or softly lightens o'er her face, right? How dear their dwelling place. That is a purposeful biblical image, right? The dwelling place. Of course, he's applying it to sex here, right? The speaker. He says, so it's inverted. And he says, and on that cheek and o'er that brow, so soft, so calm, yet eloquent, the smiles that win, the tints that glow, but tell of days in goodness spent. Spent is a classic, archaic Shakespearean sexual pun, which has to do with the act of making love, right? As Biggie says, a mind at peace with all below, because she is the goddess image looking down on him, right? It's almost a Lilith image, isn't it? Right? Because he's below her. But we also get this idea of as above, so below here, a heart whose love is innocent. Do you see? On the surface, you get innocence here, but as with the typical Byron poem, there is something, the deeper level, right? The figurative meaning of this poem is that it's not innocent at all, right? In fact, this is deeply sexual, this poem, right? He says, let's read When We Two Parted, because it also ties into this this idea of like the spurned lover, right? And he says, spent, referring to is a what's the word I'm looking for? It's a you guys, I'm having dementia. What's the word for a sexual pun? what do you call that? I can't remember. Somebody help me out. Put it in the chat. It's right on the tip of my tongue. I have dementia. Where am I? Hello? Why am I wandering around in my PJs under this street lamp? I have dementia. Hello? Innuendo. Thank you. Hello? Mowgli with the high IQ. Thank you. Yes, it's an innuendo. Spent is an innuendo referring to the spending of the precious bodily fluids, says General Jack D. Ripper. Get it? Okay, so when we two parted by, come on, man. When we two parted by Lord Byron. When we two parted in silence and tears, half broken-hearted to sever for years, pale grew thy cheek and colder thy kiss. Truly that hour foretold sorrow to this. The dew of the morning sunk chill on my brow. It felt like the warning of what I feel now. The vows are all broken, and light is thy fame. I hear thy name spoken and share in its shame. They name thee before me, a knell to mine ear. A shudder comes o'er me. Why wert thou so dear? They know not I knew thee, who knew thee too well. Long, long shall I rue thee too deeply to tell. In secret we met, in silence I grieve, that thy heart could forget, thy spirit deceive. If I should meet thee after long years, how should I greet thee with silence and tears? Now, I laughed in the middle of that because I just watched the Sam Hyde poem, which is a great version, a wonderful version of that poem that the woman read about Mr. Putin. If I was your dad, this is what I would do. And so the rhymes, I laugh because this reminded me of this, rhyming the words dear and ear, right? And so, look, if you wrote this now, obviously it would be trash. I mean, it's hard to, this is why poems began to, kind of get out into free verse, because the rhyming becomes ridiculous. But do you understand why? Do you understand why this is purposeful? Why Byron makes the rhyme sound like kind of like stupid, because he's aiming this at the woman the speaker here is aiming this at the woman that he's broken up with or whatever. And so the rhymes are meant to be like down on her level from the speaker's point of view, right? In other words, he is talking down to her. And so hence the form and the content fit. But it's interesting that the idea of silence and tears is repeated in this poem. And again, we get the Byronic hero who's hurt by the lover, or at least what we just read in the biography of Byron. Now, again, going back, I like to say that we're going to judge the words in the text according to the text. So that's all we should be doing. But just as an add-on, we can say, as far as Byron's concerned, that we just read that he himself would end relationships so that he would not have to suffer as a repeat of his trauma. Of course, that was doing that, right? It was self-harm. Yes. Now, the speaker in this is not Byron. Remember that we discussed early on in the first streams that when the speaker in a poem, the speaker in the poem is not the author. It's not that we're not saying Lord Byron says this. We're saying the speaker. And that's what sort of makes it live. It makes it live as literature. It makes it live forever. That you could read this poem and certainly identify with it in terms of breaking up, right? One more thing here. I thought I would read some parts from Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, which is one of his epic poems. And it's this is called Apostrophe to the Ocean. It's pretty famous. An apostrophe, which is spelled the same as the punctuation mark that signifies possession or contraction, right? An apostrophe in literature is a direct statement to an inanimate object. So it's kind of like personification, but personification is when you're describing an inanimate object as an animate object. Apostrophe was when you're speaking directly to it. So in this, he's speaking directly to the ocean as if it's a person. He says, there is a pleasure in the pathless woods. There is a rapture on the lonely shore. Uh-oh. What'd you say? I hear blood moon pies of Israel. The blood moon pies of Israel are calling. There is a rapture on the lonely shore. There is a society where none intrudes. By the deep sea and music in its roar. I love not man the less but nature more. From these our interviews in which I steal. From all I may be or have been before. To mingle with the universe and feel what I can ne'er express, yet cannot all conceal. Stanza 2. Stanza 2 says, roll on, thou deep and dark blue ocean, roll. 10,000 fleets sweep over thee in vain. Man marks the earth with ruin. His control stops with the shore. Upon the watery plain the wrecks are all thy deed. Nor doth remain a shadow of man's ravage, save his own, when for a moment like a drop of rain he sinks into thy depths with bubbling groan, without a grave, unknelled, uncoffined, unknown. Now, this is a really famous stanza here. We didn't talk about the form of She Walks in Beauty, which is a sort of a Byronic stanza. It's a ballad stanza. It goes A, B, A, B, C, C, A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B, right? C, D, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, E, F. But in this one, we get the 6, 7, 8, 9. So we get a 10-line stanza, which is it's not ballad stanza. It's not sing-songy. Hey, what's up, bass mom, Rachel? Good to see you. Shout out to you. We were talking about you a little bit earlier and mentioning your stream with DPH. So shout out to you guys. This stanza, the second stanza of Apostrophe to the Ocean by Byron, is roll on, thou deep and dark blue ocean, roll, right? Again, we get the standard form of iambic pentameter because we're talking about structure. The structure of the universe. We're talking about form. And this stanza has always really gotten me. It's really, I remember when I first read this and I was like 16, I guess. And this stanza has really always gotten to me. It's a meaningful passage to me because for one, I'd always heard it in relation to like the Navy. My great uncle was in the Navy in the big doves in WW2. And this sort of thing is especially revered. This poem is especially revered in Britain. And it's because of the emphasis, right, obviously on the British Navy, right, rule Britannia. But it's also haunting. It's dark. I mean, you could say this is like the perfect poem for Jack and Rose because look, right. And okay, so I don't mean that literally, but that last image, we've talked before in chats before about how that last image in Titanic, right? Jack and Rose are floating in the cold emptiness of the Stygian blackness, says Milton, of this ocean, right? And they are freezing, almost like they're in the ninth circle. And notice that Jack in Titanic, Jack is obviously the trickster character, right? He's the Lucifer character because he takes Rose, right? The symbolism of Rose, like in Robert Herrick's poems or in Marvell. He takes the rose and he sort of plucks the rose from her station. She's this pure, innocent girl. She is going to marry Billy Zane. I'm walking around in a wig. What's wrong with that? Just put a wig on me, right? But he is, he's rich, he's handsome, he's probably, he's unstable, right? He's got a family and he's going to save her family, which is Byronic in a sense because they are rich in name and title, but they don't have any money. But instead, she is plucked from above on the top decks and taken down to the bowels of the ship, right? Where it's this hell world of, dancing and drinking and fun and chaos or whatever. Okay, not the fun. It is fun in the film, but the dancing, drinking, chaos, and he sort of introduces her to decadence, right? And then he shows her his drawings, draw me like one of your French girls, which are like of, these mutant demon creatures in his book. He gets her to spit. He gets her to do all this, stuff that's out of character. And then finally at the end, right? By the way, he's chained up, right? He's chained up in the bowels, in the hell world of the Titanic, the Titanian darkness. And then he is holding on to the wood. And what happens? He's holding on to the rood, which is going to save her, I suppose. It's probably reading too far into it. The ROOD, rood, right? And what does he do? He lets go. And he lets go. And I mean, I know he falls, but he falls into the darkness of the abyss, right? He goes back into the abyss. Now, that's my brief analysis of Titanic. But this poem, what's the reason I guess it's always appealed to me is like, okay, so when you go swimming, like when you go to the ocean, this is what, all right, so story time. Okay, this is what I do when I go to the ocean. When I go to the ocean, when I go to the beach, I run. I'm standing on the beach first. Like when I first get there, I'm standing on the beach and I just run as fast as I can straight into the water, and I swim out as far as I can for, I don't know, a minute, and I don't stop. And then I turn around because, it's a shock to the system, right? You just got to you got to dive in. You got to dive in. Yeah, nuke that fool right there. And thanks, homies. And then what happens? I turn around and you're so far from the shore, and that's kind of it's thrilling to me. I don't know. It's thrilling because it's like I always get this feeling of. I mean, I love the water and I love swimming, and I spent my entire childhood swimming and in the water. And so I always imagined though, swimming in the ocean, that like you're swimming along and then all of a sudden I imagine the continental shelf drops off underneath me. And so you go from like swimming right over the land to it drops off and you're swimming just over this vast abyss. Right. And the thought of like, if you just drop down into the water, you're just going to like drop forever. Like, remember in the movie The Abyss, right? Where Ed Harris, he's breathing the pink liquid or whatever, and he has to drop into the Laurentian abyss, right? And so I imagine that. And then when that happens, I go, oh, and then I turn around and I swim as fast as I can back to shore. That's after I turn and I lie on my back, just looking at the sun for a little bit. So I'm just floating. But then I swim as fast as I can back into the shore. And then the way I swim really fast is like, I always imagine that there's a shark like right on my trail. So I like swim super fast. And I've done that since I was a little kid. But this poem sort of gets at that in a way, right? He says, roll on. Notice in terms of the mechanics of the poem, notice that there's a lot of O's in this line, a lot of the letter O. And we talked about, man, you are drinking loud, doggy. I know I had to say it again, y'all, just like the last one, but see, drinking that water loud. But the O's in this line signify, obviously, the O of the ocean and the yawning O of the great expanse of the globe, right? He says, roll on, thou deep and dark blue ocean, roll. And it becomes almost like a incantation, right? But it's an apostrophe. He's speaking directly to the ocean. He says, 10,000 fleets sweep over thee in vain. We mentioned in the last stream, Ezra Pound's pull down thy vanity, vanity pull down, right? Or is that it's from Ecclesiastes, right? And it's obviously a reference to the British Navy and ruling the globe, right? But no matter what, you can't rule it all. Man marks the earth with ruin, he says, right? Jim, right? What have they done to the earth? What have they done to our fair sister? Dragged her and ravaged and dragged her and ripped her and beat her, dragged her with Stuck her with knives in the side of the dawn, dragged her with fences and dragged her down, right? As Jim says when the music's over. He says, man marks the earth with ruin. That was a bad, I'm sorry. That was a bad, I'm not remembering my lines very well tonight. But I got a lot going on in the old skull, you guys. His control, man's control, stops with the shore. Upon the watery plain, the wrecks are all thy deed, nor doth remain a shadow of man's ravage. Well, ain't that the truth, right? You know, you bury a man at sea, and they just drop down and they're gone, right? Never to be found again, never to be dug up, right? He says, save his own when for a moment, like a drop of rain, he sinks into thy depths and bubbling groan, the great groan. Now, this is great onomatopoeia, right? This is onomatopoetic because the groan represents the sound of the personified ocean speaking, right? The waves, the groan of the ocean and falling into the endless depths without a grave, unknelled, uncoffined, and unknown. Notice all of the uns in the last line, right? This is almost like a Dantean image, right? The city of Dis, everything is the not. It's the it's the opposite of life on earth, he says, right? Life, death in the ocean. And also the unknelled is a reference to, it's a reference to the death knell, but it's also a reference to Meditation 17 by John Donne, right? Ask not for whom the bell tolls, right? It tolls for thee. Yes. When the knell knolls, he says, John Donne says in one of his other poems, when the knell knolls, the knell, right? He's saying every man is part of the mainland. But what he says here, he's saying here that you drop off into the depths of the unknown ocean, right? That reminds me of another Doors song, right? Horse Latitudes. Remember Horse Latitudes from Strange Days? Anybody remember that one? Which is actually just a poem. When the still sea conspires in armor and her sullen and aborted currents breed tiny monsters, true sailing is dead. Awkward instant, and the first animal is jettisoned. Plagues furiously pumping their stiff green gallop, and heads bob up, poise, pause, something consent, a mute nostril agony, carefully refined and sealed over. That's that Horse Latitudes poem by Jim Morrison. Okay, so anyway, that's about it for Byron. We read a couple of his poems now. I'm definitely not going to go into Don Juan, the epic Lord Byron poem, but I think that's good enough for Byron. So next time what we'll do is we cover some Shelley. We might go back and do Blithe Spirit. We certainly need to get more into Blake. And it's interesting. Recently, you know how Roy Batty in Blade Runner quotes Blake, right, with that poem America that he wrote when he says he's witnessed the ships off the fire ships off the Orion. But anyway, I was thinking about that last monologue that Roy Batty gives before he dies. And I was looking up, I was trying to figure out if Roy Batty itself, the name is an anagram, because it's a weird name, right? Roy Batty, the MK Delta programmed assassin in Blade Runner, right? Who, by the way, is my profile pic for this channel. But Roy Batty, I was looking up whether it was an anagram, and then I found some Redditor had found that his entire monologue is an anagram itself, which is really interesting and really typical of a pure Reddit autist. So that's going to be great. We're going to go into that. Rachel says, what'd she say? Rachel says, they start with Byron Shelley, then jump on your belly and bust your balloons. You guys, we should have a poetry night. We should have a poetry night where everyone contributes a poem. I've, you know, I'm not really going to talk about it much, but I've written 3 books of poems, and so we can go over those sometime. I don't know. You might not. You probably won't be interested, but you might because the book I wrote for my when I was in grad school, the poet Crispy, you'll know this guy, Paul Muldoon, who Synchro, Paul Muldoon's famous book, Pulitzer Prize nominated, was called Horse Latitudes, and Paul Muldoon read my book, and I know that when I was at Queens, because then I saw him later when I was back in America. I saw him at a poetry reading, and I said my name, and he recognized me and brought up my book, which was cool, but it's not published. But it's a book of it's about megalomania and dictators. So I don't know, you might find it interesting. It's whatever. Aside from that, we could have a. It is Lily von Stupp. Oh my God, Rachel. Points for you. Mega points for quoting Lily von Stupp from Blazing Saddles, right? What in the wide world of sports are y'all doing? We can't really quote any other. Work. Holy underwear. So yeah, we can do another night. We can do a Blazing Saddles night. Okay, so that's about all I got. Right now, just for interest, I don't know what you guys are up to, but what am I reading right now just for fun? I just started reading this. This is totally not in line with what we're reading, but my dad sent me this book, 10 Days in Harlem. It's about Fidel Castro. When Fidel Castro went and spoke at the UN in the 60s, which is, I read about it in the Khrushchev biography that I read. And interesting that Khrushchev, by the way, has just come back up, obviously, with all the stuff going on. But with PUTIN speech last night or 2 nights ago regarding Catherine the Great. And then I saw a commentary on Khrushchev. But I learned about Castro. I was reading about Castro recently going to the UN and how popular he was in what he stayed in Harlem, or so they say, right? When he did that. So it's a pretty interesting book. What else? What else is going on? That's about it, you guys. We need to go back, and there's a bunch of stuff we need to do. We need to go back and talk about Anglo-Saxon poems, especially the Seafarer and the Wanderer, because they're Anglo-Saxon pure Viking poems, where we can discuss the question of free will versus fate within the poem. We can discuss whether the poems themselves were pieced together by a monk. Remember, the monks saved all of this literature, right? And whether it was written by a warrior poet monk who was a Christian, but who had just recently been Christianized because there are Viking fate, Nordic elements in it, or whether it's put together and the monk added it. We need to finish our romantic era poetry. We need to talk about classical and Enlightenment literature. Later on, we'll get into modernity, and we have so much to talk about with modern that it's sort of endless. We could do tons more Shakespeare. Shakespeare wrote 37 plays, and we've only discussed 2 of them, right? And only one section of Julius Caesar. So we could go back and do that. Of course, we did Macbeth. Go back and see the Macbeth stream if you're watching this later. We could talk more about Paradise Lost. We could discuss French poetry and Rimbaud, Verlaine, Baudelaire. We could discuss contemporary poets like Yusef Kouminyaka, my favorite living poet, Yusef Kouminyaka, whom I met a few times. We could discuss Seamus Heaney, whom I've met. But I mentioned I was talking to Bay's mom earlier, and we're going to do one on Sylvia Plath. And, I'm going to do Sylvia Plath and Ted Hughes. I've got a lot of Ted Hughes right up here. A lot of Ted Hughes. I've got a signed Ted Hughes somewhere in there. I got all Ted Hughes' books, multiple copies of his books. We need to do Dylan Thomas, which is up here. All this right here is Rimbaud. That's all French poetry. And Artaud, we can do Artaud with the Theater of Blood. We can talk about Garcia Lorca, Spanish poetry. I've been to his house in Spain. Whatever you guys want to talk about, anything you want to bring up, put it in the comments. That'd be great. Put it in the comments after the video's over. We can do a whole section on beat literature. We can talk about endlessly about Jack Kerouac. We can talk about William Burroughs and intelligence connections. We can talk about history. All of this is history, including World War II, Northern Ireland, ancient history, Viking history, Roman history, Greek history, whatever you guys want to be, whatever you guys want to go over. Any specific works that you want me to get to, put them in the comments below. And thank you, everybody, for sharing the stream and liking it. And I really appreciate you being here. And yeah, again, if you got that, if your Dugan coins came in, please drop one in the Cash App link. PayPal also in the description link, but Cash App especially. Because we could all use it. I mean, have you been to the gas station? Obviously, now is even the normie talking point, right? But look, man, we got to pay bills. We got to get some good internet. And we got to get some equipment, and we got to get these super chats up. And I really got to get my sub. We've only been going for about 2 weeks, but we got to get these subs up and got to keep going. So, yeah, whatever you guys want to talk about, just leave it in the comments. And again, thank you, and I appreciate it. I love all the comments that you guys are sending me. And this is fun. I like that we're doing this. I know I'm babbling on now, but I like that we're doing this on a daily basis because, I mean, we have all of our friends that are always talking, right? And they give us the most excellent content, especially Jerry, Exposing Powerful Lies. Thank you, my brother. Everybody like and sub to him if you're watching this later, because everybody in here probably already is. And then, of course, all of our big-time E-Celeb friends, right? TGF, The Green Feathers, please go to his channel and watch his excellent interviews. Do that right now, right after this is over. Check out Rachel's appearances on primetime TV, and even better with Jerry at Exposing Powerful Lies. And yeah, but let's get this going. And I like that we're doing it every day because we have all of our regular friends that talk. But I don't know. We probably all have a lot to say. So we might as well just talk about, other stuff, other areas, literature, books, worldviews, truth, beauty, goodness. And so I just thought, let's just do it. It gives me something to look forward to every day. And maybe you guys, hopefully you guys are enjoying it. And it's just something to listen to on your drive time ride in your Suzuki Samurai back to the crib after a long, hard day at Bojangles. So thank you again, guys. I really appreciate it. I love you. I'm thankful to God for each of you. I pray for you in the world right now. And, I pray that we just keep living. Okay. LIBIN. So thank you very much. And I'll see you guys later. Love you all. Peace.